Over the last 30 years, Mrinal Sen has been directing feature films, mostly in Bengali. His films represent some of the best work of serious Indian cinema. His growth as a filmmaker has been remarkable, and each of his films stems from his commitment to cinema as a social medium.
Ready? Action.
In 1988, Mrinal Sen set to work on Ek Din Achanak. The latest feature confirmed the quality of quiet introspection he has invested in his last few films.
When I look back and I try to make a very dispassionate assessment of what I have done all my life, I have seen that for the last several years I have withdrawn into myself. Instead of pointing my finger at the enemy outside, I have been trying to see the enemy within me. It is very important to strip yourself, to bring yourself to your proper size. Quite often we start mythicizing, and the people around me also start mythicizing me as much as it does to you. And so it's to bring them to their sizes. This happens only when you can do a little bit of introspection.
Although he chose to make Ek Din Achanak in Hindi, there pervades a strong autobiographical streak in the film.
To me, it is the most complex film of mine, but intensely human at the same time. The head of the family, suddenly one day, he went out to come back within an hour, but he never came back. And the film lasts for 1 year after his disappearance, and it ends on the anniversary of his disappearance. You know, and during this time, the children, they start going back to the past.
As a young man, he was born in Faridpur, now in Bangladesh. Yet the trauma of Bengal's partition never became an obsession with him. He integrated into the city, and his primary concern has always remained the city and its people.
I was born in East Bengal. I was partly educated in East Bengal, then came to Calcutta. And since then I have become a Calcuttan. I don't miss my native place. This is a part of my whole existence. And it acts both as a stimulant, Calcutta, and as an irritant. So that way I am very much a part of Calcutta. I cannot escape it. But there is always a kind of dissatisfaction. Dissatisfaction with the state of things around me. And that is why, you know, this is what I try to articulate in very many ways.
For Mrinal Sen, the brush with cinema was accidental, and even more so his career as a film director. It was in the outhouse of this studio, today a dilapidated structure, that Mrinal Sen began his career, soldering capacitors in the sound recording department.
I had no interest in cinema as such, and I was not even a habitual film goer. And then what happened after that, you know, I came out, and very accidentally I ran into a book on the aesthetics of cinema, and I was bowled over completely. I started watching films, mostly Indian films, and I hated these films. But since then, I started writing on cinema, on the aesthetics of cinema and poetry, on cinema and painting, on the dialectics of cinema, something like this. And then I thought I could be a good filmmaker. And when I made my first film without having much of education, practical education, and I made one. And that was the biggest of all big disasters that could ever happen under the sun. It was a lousy film, lousiest of all lousy films ever made. And I thought filmmaking is not my cup of tea, and I left filmmaking and became a medical detailer, selling medicines without knowing anything of medicine.
He, however, cut short his vocation as a medical representative to go back to making films and gradually established his métier in the cinema of social relevance. The influence of the Indian People's Theatre Association in his early days had been considerable. More than anything else, this apprenticeship helped sharpen his social perceptions.
It was very difficult to get rid of the radical students' movement as long as you were a student. So I was taken in. And for that matter, most of the sensitive people, I mean, having some intelligence, having some grey matter here, and I believe I have some with me, and I couldn't escape it. And so it is logically, I was into it. I was not interested in how many people died out of starvation. I know that 5 million people in 1 year just starved and dropped dead. But then it would have been very journalistic had I given an account of the deaths. My interest was to show how during this social calamity, which killed so many people, how the last vestige of human decency in us also gets lost.
By 1969, Mrinal Sen was already a cinema talent to reckon with.
Relationship between a young girl, a very little girl, and this man almost in his 60s. This relationship impressed me very much, and that perhaps came out very well. And some of my European friends told me, and well, none of the Indians told me so. They said they found this film to be the most amorous of all my films. Ashamed of using my medium as a pamphleteer's pulpit, as long as I could make it emotionally valid. And I think I could make it valid at times, not always. And I'm not ashamed to be called a pamphleteer, not at all. Political manifestation took place in Calcutta. And Calcutta, without a political demonstration, without a political manifestation, at least once in a week, is almost like reading Hamlet without Prince of Denmark. But that was the time. And when the left activists had to run away from their homes, and they had very bad time. So that was the time when the film was released. So, and all the 3 shows in the largest theatre in Calcutta, centrally located, Metro, all the 3 shows were full for 12 continuous weeks. And this is not because of the film alone, but because of the time also. It was almost like the people buying tickets and going to attend a protest meeting. And later on, when the movement also started dying out, that was the time when we also thought of looking back and doing a kind of reappraisal. And then we could see that there was an element of establishmentarianism even on the left front. That was it. But when we were making this film, we knew it very well that the line between self-criticism and slander is a very thin line. We were perfectly aware of it.
We were shooting in one location, one particular flat a lot of the time. As it happens, we were also, during the time that the film was being shot, we were also staying together, even though the film was being shot in Calcutta. So this dialogue, discussion, evolution, not only in terms of my role, but in terms of the entire film, was a continuing process. In fact, I think it's only, 2 days or 3 days before it was shot that the end of the film was actually evolved. And that also was a kind of a group thing that happened in evolving it.
An interesting aspect of Mrinal Sen's filmography has been the number of films he has made in regional languages other than his native Bengali. In 1966, he made Matiro Manusho in Uriya, and in 1977 he chose to film Prem Chand's Hindi classic Kafan into a Telugu language film.
Prem Chand is one of my most favorite writers. I think he is the most important writer of this century. And all that one has to do about Prem Chand is to, when one reads his story, one has to invest his stories with contemporary sensibilities. Otherwise the stories look and sound very simplistic. That was it. And that is what you have to do. So, and this is his last, Kafan is his last story.